Howdy howdy, my name is John, and this video is my reading wrap-up for the month of July 2022. The first book I finished was A Man Called Ove by Frederic Backman. Now, I've heard the name in this title pronounced a lot of different ways, but I also listened to the audiobook version of this while I read along physically, and so I'm going to go with that pronunciation. This is the first novel that Frederic Backman wrote, and it's also the first one of his that I've read. This isn't really my preferred reading genre, but overall I did enjoy the book. This book has some heartwarming moments, and it does have some humorous moments as well. I gave the book 4 stars, and I'll definitely be picking up another Backman in the future. The next book I finished was Zero Magnitude by Ronn. This is the 3rd book in his Galaxy Mavericks series. I've been reading these as a buddy read with Beth Ann Bruning Socolar. Unfortunately, this book was a huge letdown from the first 2. I actually liked the story and I liked the main character, but the author really didn't write this in a way that I appreciated. This book has a main story with flashbacks to the past when the character was a child. And it switches back and forth between these two perspectives very quickly after only short passages. And I found that really annoying. As a result, I only gave this book 3 stars. The next book I read was The Red House Mystery by A. Milne. Now, Milne is the author of Winnie the Pooh. This was part of a read-along sponsored by very literary Kari in her Black Hearts book club. Mystery is not my preferred genre, but this is a fun read. I gave the book 4 stars, and I do recommend it if you're a fan of mysteries. The next book I finished was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Now, this was the first time I'd ever read this book. There are parts of this novel that I did enjoy. There's some witty dialogue between the characters. However, there are long parts of this novel that I found rather boring. I'm just not all that interested in the activities and the mores of the upper class in Britain during the Regency era. As a result, I gave this novel 3 stars. Now, I did enjoy this more than I enjoyed Persuasion, which I read last year. Persuasion is a much more serious novel, and I appreciated the humor in this one more. I did watch the Netflix adaptation of Persuasion this month as well. Honestly, I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the book. It's a solid 4-star movie for me. I thought Dakota Johnson did a really good job, and I enjoyed the performances of the other actors as well, with the exception of Captain Wentworth. Either the acting or the direction for his character wasn't quite right, in my opinion. I know the movie's gotten a lot of negative reviews, and if you're expecting a close adaptation of the book, yeah, you'll probably be disappointed. I do recommend going and seeing it with an open mind. The next book I finished was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This book was actually a big disappointment for me as well. This book has a lot of action scenes where it doesn't really make sense for there to be an action scene, especially with the main character as presented. Now, this novel does do some clever things, and it's a quick read, which I did appreciate. It is a favorite of a lot of people, and it is worth checking out and making up your own mind about it. For me, though, it's just a 3-star novel. The next pair of books I finished, I actually started a while ago. This is The Divine Comedy by Dante, and it was part of a read-along sponsored by Tom L.A. Books. Tom did an introductory video plus a video for each of the 100 cantos. It's a project he started back in December of 2020, and I've been reading along, especially in this book, since then. Now, the book that I'm holding is Longfellow's translation, and it was written in the 1800s. It uses a lot of kind of arcane English, and as such, it's not really the best resource for a first-time reader. I actually got through Inferno reading just this copy and really struggled with it. Reading Purgatorio, I picked up a copy of Robert and Jean Hollander's translation and copy of Purgatorio. In January, I started Paradiso, and I also used the Robert and Jean Hollander translation and commentary for this one as well. I found the commentary in Purgatorio more useful than I found the commentary in this one. I also really didn't enjoy Paradiso as much as I enjoyed the first two canticles either. I'm glad I actually read the Divine Comedy, and I'm glad Tom sponsored this project because I, quite frankly, would not have gotten through it without his help. It's something I'm glad I've read, but I can't really say that I enjoyed reading it. Not nearly as much as Tom did. Just, poetry, translated poetry on top of that, really doesn't work for me quite as much as it does for others. If you've never read the Divine Comedy, a suggestion that I would have is maybe find a prose translation. Probably what I should have done when I started this project, but I gave this book 3 stars. Again, mostly because I didn't find the commentary quite as helpful as I did in Purgatorio. I also gave this 3 stars. This edition does not have any commentary at all, and I think it would be a good resource for people who are fans of the Divine Comedy, who want a printed copy of Longfellow's translation, but it's definitely not for the beginner. The next book I finished was Tatham Mound by Piers Anthony. In Piers Anthony's autobiography and in an interview I saw of him, he actually called this his best novel. Unfortunately, I don't agree. There are some parts of this novel that really are great. Unfortunately, there are parts of this novel where the story drags. It's an interesting story overall, and it is a book that I would recommend someone to read, whether you're a Piers Anthony fan or not. I did give the novel 4 stars, and it was a buddy read with very literary Kari, and I enjoyed discussing the book with her. The next book I finished was Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick. Now, I've only seen a couple of movies that Anna has been in, but in the interviews I've seen of her, she does seem like an interesting person. I did enjoy reading this book, and I gave it 4 stars. I would certainly recommend this book if you're a fan of Anna Kendrick. The last book I finished in July was Bring the Jubilee by Ward Moore. Last year I reread Greener Than You Think by Ward Moore, and when I was doing research for that book, I saw mention of this book, which is widely considered Ward Moore's best book. And after reading it, I can certainly understand why that is the case. I'm not normally a character-driven story reader, but this book is very well done. This book imagines a world where the South won the American Civil War. And because the South won, it was able to force terms that forced the United States to become a kind of backwater country. It was definitely not one of the major players. I actually have a little bit of trouble accepting that world, but I don't think this story would have worked in any other setting. I gave this book 5 stars, and if you're someone who enjoys alternate history, this is definitely a book you want to check out. If you've never read alternate history, this is probably one of the best examples of that genre, and I would recommend reading it for that reason also. While I had some disappointing reads this month, I really enjoyed the final book that I read. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.